I stood outside JFK Airport at midnight watching my phone battery drop to 8%, calling my family over and over while everyone else got picked up around me. 12 calls. 12 voicemails. 0 answers. Then my mom finally texted back, and what she said made me realize I'd been invisible to my own family my entire life. Here's my question for you. What would you do if the people who were supposed to love you most treated you like you didn't even exist? Stay until the end because what started as a forgotten airport pickup turned into a viral story that cost my family their perfect reputation. And I didn't even have to try. Karma did all the work. Hey everyone, my name is Maya, and this is the story of how being left at an airport at 18 became the moment I finally stopped begging my family to see me, and how my decision to walk away completely dismantled the perfect family image they'd spent years building. Before we get into this, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button right now. It really helps this story reach people who need to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when my mom goes from calling me a disappointment to leaving 37 desperate voicemails begging me to come back. And drop a comment below. Have you ever been forgotten by your own family? Because I want you to know, you're not alone and you're not crazy. Now let me take you back to that night. When I was 18, standing by the pickup curb at JFK with my suitcase and a dead phone battery hovering at 10%, I realized something brutal. My own family couldn't even be bothered to come get me after my first semester at college. That night, I called them 12 times in a row, watching each call ring out and drop to voicemail like I was a spam number instead of their daughter. No one picked up. Not my mom, not my golden boy brother, not my too busy sister. Just silence and that little call failed screen mocking me. By the time my phone finally buzzed, it wasn't a call. It was a text from my mom that said, word for word, "If you want attention, try not being such a disappointment next time." I remember staring at that message while cars pulled up around me, other kids getting swept into hugs and back seats in warm cars, and I was just left there. I ordered an Uber with the last bit of battery I had and made myself a promise in that moment. If I was such a disappointment, then one day they were going to be truly disappointed by how completely I walked away from them. I didn't know it yet, but that forgotten airport pickup was the first scene in a story that would cost my family their perfect image, their comfort, and the daughter they thought they could ignore forever. Stay with me until the end, and I'll show you exactly how my mom went from calling me a disappointment to blowing up my phone with 37 desperate messages begging me to come back. When my Uber finally pulled into our quiet little cul-de-sac in Connecticut, it was already dark. But our house was lit up like a Christmas tree. Music was thumping from inside. Cars were packed along the curb. The driveway was full. For a second, some stupid hopeful part of me thought, maybe they threw a surprise welcome home party for me. Then I heard someone shout my brother's name over the music and that tiny hope died on the spot. I dragged my suitcase up the front steps and let myself in. The living room was crowded. Balloons everywhere. A banner on the wall that said, "Congratulations, Marcus," in shiny gold letters. My mom Linda was in the kitchen laughing with a group of neighbors, holding a glass of wine like this was the happiest night of her life. My dad Paul was clapping my brother on the back while Marcus held court in the center of the room, retelling the story of his big promotion in marketing for what sounded like the 10th time. I stood there in the doorway for a full minute before anyone even noticed I was home. When they finally did, it was my sister Ashley who glanced over from the couch, wrinkled her nose like I'd tracked in something from outside and said, "Oh, you're back," before going right back to her phone. My mom rushed over, not to hug me but to hiss under her breath, "Maya, you're blocking the hallway. Move your suitcase. This is important for your brother." No, "How was your semester?" No, "Did you eat?" Just, "You're in the way." I parked my suitcase by the stairs and watched as my dad raised a glass and said he was proud of Marcus for making something of himself, for being the future of this family, the one we can really count on. I had just finished my first semester on a merit scholarship for graphic design in Boston, but apparently that didn't count as making something of myself. I slipped upstairs, changed into an old hoodie and opened my laptop, thinking I'd at least distract myself with some design work. When I logged into my banking app out of habit, my stomach dropped. The savings account I'd been building since high school, from part-time jobs and scholarship refunds, was lower than I remembered. A lot lower. Scrolling through the transactions, I saw it. A transfer out a few weeks earlier labeled with my mom's name. Later that night, when the house finally got quiet and the guests left, I asked her about it in the kitchen while she stacked empty plates. She didn't even look guilty. We needed it for Marcus's trip, Maya. These things aren't cheap. He's investing in his future. You'll be fine, you're creative. You'll figure it out. She said it like that was supposed to be a compliment. My dad backed her up with that calm, patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. Your brother's job is more stable than whatever art thing you're doing. This is a family decision. Don't make it about you. It was my money. My part-time shifts. My missed parties. But apparently my future was negotiable as long as Marcus's looked shiny on LinkedIn. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom surrounded by old sketchbooks, I felt this mix of rage and numbness I didn't have words for. So I grabbed my phone, opened a forum I'd seen people talk about on TikTok, a subreddit where kids with toxic parents told their stories, and I started typing. I didn't use their names or mine. I just wrote about the airport, the 12 unanswered calls, the disappointment text, the party, the stolen savings. I hit post expecting maybe one or two strangers to tell me to get over it. Instead, my notifications started lighting up with replies from people saying, "Same. That happened to me too. You're not crazy. You deserve better." For the first time, people who didn't even know me were angrier about what happened than my own parents were. I scrolled through every comment, screenshotting a few, and then opened the Notes app on my phone. I made a new note titled Receipts, and started listing every time my family had treated me like a background character in their story. The missed recitals, the cancelled birthday dinners, the way my designs magically became my brother's ideas in his presentations. It felt petty at first, but writing it all down made something click. This wasn't one bad night at an airport. This was a pattern, a system, and systems can be broken. I didn't know exactly how I was going to do it yet, but as I sat there under the leftover glow of Marcus's balloons, typing with my thumbs in the dark, I realized those little digital notes weren't just me venting. They were step one of a plan I hadn't even admitted to myself yet. The blueprint for walking away from a family that only remembered I existed when they needed something from me. If you're still watching, hit that like button because what happens next turns this quiet rebellion into a full-blown internet movement. Subscribe so you don't miss how one TikTok video changed everything. And comment below, have you ever documented the ways your family hurt you? Let me know. By the time my senior year rolled around, that night at JFK felt like a bad memory I'd folded up and shoved into a drawer, but it hadn't gone away. It had just hardened into something sharper. I still went home on breaks. Still watched my mom gush over Marcus's big wins. Still listened to Ashley complain about how stressed she was with high school while I pulled 2 a.m. shifts at my campus job to cover what my family plan didn't. But I stopped asking them to show up for me. At least that's what I told myself. When graduation season hit at my college in Boston, the emails started coming in. Cap and gown orders, guest tickets, instructions for families. My friends were freaking out about how many relatives were flying in whose parents were going to cry the hardest. I forwarded the details to our family group chat, half expecting to be ignored. Instead, my mom reacted with a thumbs up emoji, and a day later a text, "We'll see if we can make it. Your brother's schedule is crazy right now." Your brother's schedule. Not hers. Not my dad's. His. I tried to let it go. I picked up extra design gigs on the side, cheap logo jobs and flyer designs I found online, and told myself I didn't care who sat in the audience as long as I walked that stage. But as the date got closer, the silence got louder. The night before graduation, I finally called my mom, just once, just to make it clear I still wanted them there. "So what time are you guys leaving in the morning?" I asked, pacing my tiny off-campus room, staring at the gown hanging from my closet door. She sighed like I'd asked for a kidney. "Maya, your brother needs the car tomorrow. He has a really important client meeting. We can't be in 2 places at once." I waited for her to follow it up with, "But we'll rent a car, or we'll take the train," or literally anything that sounded like effort. It never came. "You'll be fine," she said instead. "They're probably streaming it online anyway, right? We'll watch later." We didn't talk about my 4 years of busting my ass. My scholarship. The way I'd been quietly freelancing to keep myself afloat. We talked about Marcus's meeting for 10 more minutes. Then she hung up because dinner was ready. The next day I stood in a sea of caps and gowns on the lawn, listening to last names being called, watching my friends wave at their families in the stands, dads with signs, moms with flowers, siblings screaming their names like it was a concert. I scanned the crowd out of habit even though I knew better. No familiar faces. No banner. No one. When they called my name, I walked, smiled for the camera, shook hands with people who barely knew me, and saw my reflection in the huge screen on the field. For a split second it hit me. My face was bigger on that screen than it had ever been in my own house. After the ceremony, everyone scattered into clusters, taking pictures, crying, planning celebratory dinners. I stepped aside under a tree, pulled out my phone and opened our family group chat. "No, we're so proud of you." "No, how did it go?" "Just a text from my mom sent 3 hours earlier. Don't forget to send your brother the Netflix password again." It stopped working. I opened my banking app again, this time with my hands shaking. Monthly charges glared back at me. The family phone plan in my name, streaming services, random subscriptions that technically we used, but that pulled money from my account every single month. I realized that while they were too busy to drive to my graduation, my account had been quietly showing up for them the entire time. They didn't miss me. They missed my login. Right there on that lawn, still in my cap and gown, I made a different kind of promise than the generic, "Go change the world" speech we just heard. I promised I was done funding a family that couldn't even bother to clap for me. That night, instead of going out, I sat on my bed with my laptop open, canceling things one by one. I called the phone company and took myself off the family plan. Set up my own account. Changed passwords. Turned off autopay on anything tied to my card. In between customer service hold music, I browsed freelance sites and job boards, sending out applications for design gigs like my life depended on it, because in a way it did. A few days later, I filmed a quick, messy TikTok in my dorm. No makeup. Just puffy eyes and a cap and gown hanging crooked in the background. POV. Your family skipped your college graduation but still expects you to pay the Netflix bill. I added a caption about being left at JFK at 18 and about quietly deciding to stop paying for people who never showed up. I almost didn't post it. Then I hit upload and went to bed. By the time I woke up, my phone was blowing up with notifications. Comments from strangers saying, "This hit way too close to home. I canceled the family plan last month too. Girl, you're not the problem." It wasn't millions of views yet, but it was enough to make me realize something huge. Out there in the comments and DMs of people I'd never met, I was seen in a way my own family had never managed. I opened my receipts note, added a new line for graduation they didn't come to, and then created a new note right under it. Plan to get out. It had 3 bullet points at first. Make money, set boundaries, leave for good. But I knew it was more than a list. It was the beginning of a life where my value didn't depend on whether my family ever chose to show up. The video that started it all wasn't even the one I tried hardest on. It was a 30-second rant I filmed in my tiny Boston kitchen at midnight, still wearing my campus security job hoodie, with my hair in a messy bun. I propped my phone against a cereal box, hit record and said, "Remember when my family left me at JFK after my first semester because my brother had a party? Yeah, they also skipped my college graduation, but still expect me to pay their Netflix bill." I laughed, but my eyes didn't. I added a caption about being the invisible kid who carries the family phone plan, and posted it without overthinking. By the time I finished washing the dishes, there were already a few thousand views. By morning it had exploded. Hundreds of thousands, then over 1 million. Comments poured in faster than I could read them. People stitched the video, duetted it, used my audio to tell their own stories about being forgotten at recitals, skipped at birthdays, ignored at graduations. Strangers called me internet sister, airport girl, the one who finally said it. I wasn't just screaming into the void anymore. The void was screaming back in agreement. I started getting DMs from people asking, "Can you talk more about how you left the family plan? How did you afford to move out? How do you set boundaries when your parents guilt trip you?" At first I felt completely unqualified. I was just a design major with a part-time job and a very damaged family. But every time I answered honestly, the response would be the same: "Thank you." I thought I was crazy. So I kept posting. I turned my receipts note into content, changing names and details, talking about patterns instead of people. Short videos turned into mini story times. I broke the airport incident into parts. The calls, the text, the Uber, the party. I blurred faces in old photos and used them as backgrounds. I didn't say Linda or Marcus or Ashley, but anyone who knew us could connect the dots. Apparently a few of them did. A cousin I hadn't talked to in years messaged me privately, "Is this about your family? Honestly, I always thought they were way harder on you than on Marcus." That's how I knew the story wasn't just in my head. It was visible from the outside. People had just decided it wasn't their business. Now it was everyone's business. My follower count climbed slowly at first, then in huge jumps every time a video hit the FYP of people who needed to hear it. I made a pinned video titled, "To the Kid Your Family Forgot to Pick Up," where I talked about budgeting, moving out, finding roommates who didn't treat you like a doormat. It felt less like complaining and more like building a roadmap for kids like me. One night, after a live stream where I answered questions about cutting off family phone plans without drowning in debt, someone in the chat said, "You should start a podcast." I'd listen. The idea lodged itself in my brain and refused to leave. A week later, sitting on my second-hand couch in my shared Boston apartment, I recorded the first episode into an old USB mic. Welcome to Forgotten at the Gate, a podcast for the kids who were never the main character in their own family. I talked about that night at JFK in more detail. About the way your heart splits when you realize the people who were supposed to be your safe place see you as optional. I cried once. Laughed twice. Almost deleted the entire episode before uploading it. People listened, not millions, not yet. But enough. They messaged me saying they played it while driving to therapy, while packing to move out, while blocking a parent's number for the first time. With each episode I wove in more of my story and more of the practical stuff. How I started freelancing, how I negotiated rates, how I separated my finances, how I stayed sane when it hurt, and how I finally left when it hurt too much. It wasn't revenge in the slash their tires way. It was revenge in the, I'm going to make sure you never get to rewrite what you did to me way. Back home the ripple effect started. First it was subtle. My mom called one evening, and instead of her usual half-distracted tone, there was a tight edge to her voice. "So apparently some people online think we're terrible parents," she said. "Marcus's coworker sent him a video and asked if it was about us. Did you really have to put our business out there like that?" I had my laptop open in front of me, email inbox filled with new client inquiries since my TikTok blew up. I stared at her name on my phone screen and felt something I'd never felt before when she tried to guilt-trip me. Nothing. Just a flat, clean calm. "I didn't use your name," I said. "If people recognize themselves, that's not my fault." She huffed and said people were exaggerating, that every family makes mistakes, that I was embarrassing them. But for once, embarrassment wasn't my problem. That same week, she texted the group chat asking why the Netflix autopay hadn't gone through, why the phone bill was higher, why the Wi-Fi company had sent a warning. I typed 3 sentences and stared at them for a long time before hitting send. "I'm not on the family plan anymore. I've been paying more than my share for years. You'll have to set up your own accounts." No explanation. No apology. Just the same flat reality they taught me to accept when they chose my brother over me. Now it was turned back on them. Not long after that, I signed a lease on a small studio in Boston. A place that was mine. No childhood trophies. No family portraits. No ghost of who my parents wanted me to be. Just blank walls, a beat-up desk, my laptop, and a microphone. When I posted the moving vlog showing empty shelves and a mattress on the floor, the comments weren't pitying, they were cheering. New life unlocked. Soft launch of your freedom. This is what breaking the cycle looks like. In DMs, people called me Big Sister Maya, thanking me for saying things they'd never had the courage to say out loud. My family had always told me my art, my design, my words were hobbies. The internet was telling me they were something else. A way out. What I didn't know yet was that my little podcast and those confession-style videos weren't just helping me move on. They were about to start dismantling the image my mom had spent years building of our perfect family. And the more I stepped into my own life, the more obvious it became that they weren't just losing access to my money or my login. They were losing access to the version of me that stayed quiet. The thing about telling your story online is that at first, it feels like you're whispering into a crowded room. Then one day you look up and realize the whole room has gone quiet, and everyone is listening. A few months after I moved into my tiny Boston studio, my podcast episodes about boundaries and being left at the airport started getting recommended on bigger channels. A mental health creator with a huge following mentioned my show, played a clip of me describing the 12 missed calls and my mom's disappointment text, and suddenly my downloads tripled. People started emailing me their own stories asking if I could read them on air. I said yes as long as I could change details and keep things anonymous. What I didn't expect was how small the world would get once my story began circulating outside my little corner of the internet. One afternoon I got a DM from my cousin, the same one who had quietly asked if the videos were about our family. This time she wrote, "So my mom is in a Facebook group with your mom and apparently people are talking about some podcast where a girl got left at the airport. Your mom is furious. She swears it's all lies." I laughed out loud when I read that, because I knew exactly what my mom's version of the story would look like. I could see her sitting there typing furiously that I was being dramatic, that they couldn't help the traffic, that I was making them sound like abusers for internet clout. The problem was, too many of the people in her life had seen enough of us over the years to know something about it rang a little too true. My cousin told me that one of the other moms in their circle had commented under a vague post my mom made about ungrateful children, asking, "Didn't your daughter get a full scholarship for design? That sounds like something to be proud of, not embarrassed by." That was the first crack in her perfect image that I got to watch in real time. While she was busy trying to manage her reputation in a Facebook mom group, I was on Zoom calls with actual clients who had found me through TikTok and my podcast. A small business owner in Seattle hired me to redesign her entire brand after hearing me talk about being the invisible kid and wanting to build something that felt like it really belonged to me. She told me, "Anyone who can turn that kind of pain into something helpful is someone I want to work with." My rates went up. My schedule filled. I started paying my bills without flinching, and even set up a separate savings account with automatic transfers going in every month. The kind of thing I used to think only other people could do. Back in Connecticut, things were not going so smoothly. I didn't know the full details until much later, but pieces filtered back to me. The phone plan I'd left stopped being auto-paid, and when the company shut it off, my mom had to go into the store and admit she didn't have enough to cover the back balance right away. She'd been treating my account like a bottomless well for so long that the reality of bills piling up without my invisible support hit fast. The streaming services I used to pay for were canceled or downgraded. The little luxuries they barely noticed were gone, until they suddenly had to pull out their own cards for them. They managed, of course. They were adults. But for the first time in years, they were managing without me as their safety net. Marcus was hit in a different way. Remember how he loved to brag about his marketing job and his big client projects? Back when we still spoke, he would send me his slide decks and ask for feedback, which really meant dumping raw content on me until I cleaned it up and made it look like something you could actually present. I would fix his fonts, fix his layout, even sketch out campaign ideas when he was stuck. He would then present it at work and get praised for being so creative. After my videos and podcast gained traction, one of his coworkers somehow put two and two together. I got a polite email from a woman in his department wanting to clarify a reference on LinkedIn. She'd seen my portfolio and recognized a few designs that looked suspiciously like Marcus's big wins. She asked if I'd ever freelanced for their agency. I told her the truth in one sentence. I've never been hired by them, but yes, I did unpaid design work for a family member who used those materials at work. I didn't trash him. I didn't rant. I just answered. Later, according to my cousin, Marcus stopped talking about his creative genius so loudly. Apparently, one of his big promotions evaporated after his boss realized he'd been leaning pretty heavily on someone else's skills. They put him on a smaller account and started expecting him to actually do his own graphic work. Without me on the other end of the phone, his perfect streak didn't look so perfect. Ashley's consequences came with deadlines. She'd grown up watching me stay up late editing essays for her, fixing her slides, walking her through online applications. She thought that was just what older sisters did. When I moved and went no contact except for necessary logistics, she still assumed I would swoop in at the last second like always. College applications, scholarship essays, recommendation reminders, all of it. Except this time, my number wasn't an open hotline. She sent a half-hearted text asking for help with one application deadline, that by then was 2 days away. I saw it. I stared at it. I put my phone face down and went back to work. A few weeks later, my cousin mentioned in passing that Ashley had missed a scholarship deadline and was devastated because no one at home had any idea how to help her navigate the process, and she assumed you would. I did feel a flicker of guilt. Then I remembered every time I'd begged her to pick me up or to just listen for 5 seconds, and gotten an eye roll in return. She wasn't ruined. She was going to be fine. But for the first time, she was going to have to figure it out without using me like a built-in guidance counselor. Inside that house, there were money arguments, Wi-Fi warnings, side comments about how, ever since Maya started running her mouth online, everything has been harder. I wasn't there for any of those fights. But you don't need to be in a room to know the temperature when you've lived in that climate your whole life. The difference was, now their stress was not my responsibility. Meanwhile, my own life kept opening up. One day, I got an email from a student organization hosting a conference on mental health and family boundaries. They'd found my podcast and wanted me to speak on a panel called, When Family Stops Being Safe. I almost said no because it sounded too big, too formal. Then I thought about that girl at JFK, the one who ordered an Uber with 10% battery and no one coming for her. I wrote back and said yes. Standing on that stage months later, looking out at a room full of students, I told the story I'd been reshaping online for months. I talked about the airport, the graduation, the group chats that only lit up when bills needed paying. I talked about the quiet decision I made to step out of the role my family had written for me. When I finished, people lined up to thank me. One girl hugged me and whispered that she was moving out next week and had been terrified until she heard my podcast. Another said she'd stopped paying for her dad's car insurance after realizing he cared more about the coverage than about calling her back. On the train ride home, I watched the city blur by and realized something simple and devastating. My family had spent years telling me I was a disappointment, that my art and my words were useless. Now those same words were being used as a lifeline by people who had never met me. My mom used to say that one day I'd understand how hard it is to be a parent. Maybe she was right. It is hard to be a parent, especially when the whole world can see what you did and your kid finally tells the truth. And the strangest part? I wasn't even trying to destroy them. I was just done covering for them. I thought that might be the end of it. That we'd just live separate lives. Them angry in their suburb, me healing in my city. I had no idea yet that the real confrontation was still coming. And that the next time they reached out, it wouldn't be about Wi-Fi or car payments or Netflix passwords. It would be about survival, pride, and the 37 messages my mom would leave on my phone, begging for something I was no longer sure they deserved. 3 years after that night at JFK, I woke up to my phone buzzing so hard on the nightstand it almost slid off the edge. It was a Sunday. I had a podcast script half finished on my laptop, coffee gone cold on my desk. And for once, my biggest worry was whether my mic would pick up the construction noises outside. I reached for my phone expecting email notifications or DMs. Instead, I saw the same name over and over on my lock screen. 37 messages. At first, they were just lines in a notification stack. Then the words started to register as I scrolled. Please pick up. We were wrong. Come back. We need to talk. This has gone too far. You're still our daughter. The same woman who once texted me, if you want attention, try not being a disappointment, was now spamming my phone like a panicked teenager who realized the breakup was real. There were voicemails too. Her voice raw and shaky, saying things I'd fantasized about hearing for years but never believed I would. I know we hurt you. I know I hurt you. I didn't understand how bad it was. Please, Maya, just talk to me. Old me would have called back immediately, desperate to finally be chosen. New me put the phone face down and sat with the feeling. It wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like standing on the other side of a line I'd drawn in permanent marker, and finally realizing they could see it too. After a couple of hours and another 10 messages, she sent the one that made me stop pretending I wasn't considering it. I'm in New York today. If you'll meet me, I'll come to you. Any coffee shop, anytime. There was a photo attached. A blurry shot from a car window of the city skyline. I stared at it while my cursor blinked over the unfinished sentence in my script about boundaries not needing anyone's approval. It felt like some kind of test I hadn't studied for. I messaged her back one line. Tomorrow. 11 a.m. Bryant Park. The coffee shop on the corner. No heart emojis. No, love you. Just logistics. The way she used to text me only about bills. The next morning I took the early train from Boston to New York. Headphones in. Playlist on. My heart doing this weird mix of dread and curiosity. It was the same city where I'd stood outside an airport 3 years earlier, waiting for people who never showed up. This time I was the one deciding whether I showed up at all. The coffee shop near Bryant Park was busy but not overwhelming, full of people on laptops and tourists clutching maps. I ordered a drink, sat by the window and watched the street. When my mom finally walked in, she looked smaller than I remembered, not literally but like some of the air had leaked out of her. Her hair was pulled back like she hadn't had time to style it. There were deep lines around her mouth. And her eyes scanned the room with a mix of hope and terror that would have broken me in half a few years ago. Maya, she said when she saw me, as if testing whether the name would still land. I stood up, but I didn't rush into a hug. She did, though, reaching out like she could make up 3 years of neglect in one squeeze. I let her hug me stiffly, then sat back down and wrapped my hands around my cup to keep them from shaking. For a minute she just looked at me, like trying to reconcile the girl in front of her with the angry voice from the podcast clips people had sent her. Then it came pouring out. "I've been listening to your show," she said, stumbling over the word. "People sent it to me. At first I was furious. I told everyone you were exaggerating. But then I kept hearing the things you said, and realizing I remembered those nights too. I just remembered them differently. Or I wanted to." She admitted the airport thing wasn't traffic, that she'd chosen to stay at the party because leaving would have made Marcus look bad. She admitted that using my savings for his trip had been easier than telling him no. She admitted she'd seen my scholarship as less impressive than his promotion because art didn't fit her picture of success. She cried quietly at first, then harder, covering her face with a napkin while people at the next table pretended not to stare. For a few minutes it was everything I thought I wanted. An admission, an apology, the words, "I was wrong." But then, like always, the twist came. "You've made us look like monsters, Maya," she said, her voice still shaking but sharper again. "Your father's co-workers listen to podcasts. Marcus's job has been difficult. Ashley's friends asked her if she's from that family. I lost a client because someone recognized my name. I know you were hurt, but airing all of this online? That was cruel." There was the real reason for the 37 messages. Not just remorse. Damage control. "You're not mad that you hurt me," I said slowly. "You're mad that people believe me." She flinched, but she didn't deny it. "We can fix this," she insisted instead. "We can make a statement together. You can say we're working on things that your parents are trying. We could even do a video, show that we're a family again. People will stop attacking us if they see you've forgiven us. The old script, I make them look good. They get to skip the hard part." I thought about every apology email I'd gotten from strangers who weren't even my parents. People who'd reached out to their own kids after hearing my story. I thought about the girl who moved out because of my podcast. The guy who said he stopped paying his parents' bills after realizing they never checked on him. My mom wanted the benefits of my platform, without accepting what she'd done to help build it. "I'm glad you're doing therapy," I said instead because she'd mentioned it in one of the messages. "I'm glad you're realizing some of this wasn't okay. But I'm not going to help you rebuild your image. That's not my job anymore." Her eyes filled again. "We're your family," she whispered. "You don't just stop being family." "You did," I said quietly. "At my graduation. Every time you took from me and called it a family decision. You stopped acting like my family a long time ago. I'm just matching your energy now." He tried a different angle then. Softer, more desperate. "We're trying, Maya. Your brother is working hard at his job. Your sister is figuring things out. We're paying our own bills now. We talk about you. We miss you. Please just come home. We can start over." I let her talk. I let her paint that picture of a fresh start, of me sliding back into the old house like nothing had ever happened. I imagined my stuff back in that bedroom. My designs on their walls. My Netflix login quietly back on their TV. And then I imagined walking through JFK alone again. And I knew my answer. "I'm not coming home," I said. "I'm building a life that doesn't require me to constantly shrink so you can feel like good parents." She looked stunned, like it had never occurred to her that my answer could actually be no. The silence between us stretched thick and unfamiliar. Finally I added, "I don't hate you. I don't want you to suffer forever. But I'm not your fixer anymore. I'm not your secret designer, your unpaid therapist, your emergency credit card. If you want a different relationship with me, it has to start with you doing the work, without asking me to clean up the mess publicly." She wiped her eyes, nodding and shaking her head at the same time. "So what?" she said, voice cracking. "We just never talk again?" I thought about my apartment, my clients, my listeners who called me their big sister, even though we'd never met. I thought about the way my chest felt when someone messaged me to say they left a toxic home because they heard my story. "We can talk," I said. "Maybe. But on my terms. And not to fix your reputation. I already have a family that shows up for me. They just don't share my DNA." For a second she looked like she might argue. Then all the fight went out of her shoulders. She just nodded, staring down into her coffee like the answer might be at the bottom of the cup. I stood up, picked up my bag and placed a few bills under my empty mug. This time I was the one leaving. As I stepped out onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed again. A notification from the podcast app. A new review from someone who said my story helped them cut off a parent who had been emotionally abusing them for years. I looked up at the sky over New York and realized something I wished someone had told me at 18. Walking away doesn't always feel victorious. Sometimes it just feels quiet. But quiet is still better than begging for scraps of love from people who only miss you when the world starts holding up a mirror. I didn't know it yet, but that quiet would become the foundation of everything that came next. If you told 18-year-old me, the girl crying outside JFK with 12 unanswered calls on her screen, that one day I'd wake up in a quiet Boston apartment with clients in my inbox and strangers calling me Big Sister, because of a podcast called Forgotten at the Gate, I would have laughed in your face. But that's where I ended up. My days now are boring in the best way. Coffee steaming on my desk. A calendar full of design deadlines I chose. Episodes outlined in a notebook that used to be filled with sketches I was too scared to show anyone. I record in a little corner of my living room surrounded by foam panels I stuck up myself, talking into a microphone about boundaries, financial independence, and the kind of family you build when the one you were born into keeps dropping you at emotional terminals with no way home. My audience grew slowly, then all at once, until there were tens of thousands of people listening every week. Some of them send voice notes. Some write long emails. A lot of them start with, "I thought I was alone until I found you." My work isn't perfect. My life isn't a movie. But it's mine. No one is quietly draining my bank account while calling me a disappointment. No one is sighing that my art is just a phase, while asking for free labor. Meanwhile, my family's consequences didn't vanish after that coffee shop conversation. My mom really did start going to therapy, trying to understand why control felt safer than love. She still posts online, but the tone is different now. Less, "We're perfect," and more, "We're figuring it out." And I'm not tagged in any of it. Marcus is still in marketing, but he actually has to do his own campaigns these days. And from what I hear, his job is fine, not legendary. Ashley ended up at a smaller school than she wanted, working part-time to cover what scholarships don't. And I like to think that somewhere between her shifts and her classes, she understands a little better what it felt like to carry more than your share. They're not ruined. This isn't some twisted fantasy where they lose everything and I sit on a pile of gold laughing. They're just living with the consequences of treating someone as disposable, and then realizing too late that she walked away for real. Sometimes my mom sends short emails now instead of floods of texts. She tells me about therapy, about how she's trying to listen more and control less, about how holidays feel quieter without me. I reply when I have the bandwidth. I keep it kind but distant, like talking to an acquaintance you used to know very well. I don't owe her my rage anymore. But I also don't owe her my return. That's the thing no one tells you about revenge. The most satisfying version isn't blowing up someone else's life. It's refusing to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. It's watching them learn to live without the version of you they abused, while you step fully into the version of you they never believed in. If you're listening to this and you feel like the extra in your own family, the forgotten kid, the default emergency contact who never gets a call back, hear me. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to build a life that doesn't revolve around fixing people who refuse to apologize. Family is not a free pass to walk all over you. Love is not supposed to feel like waiting at an airport with no ride coming. And if you've ever had to put up walls to protect yourself from the people who raised you, I want to hear your story too. Tell me in the comments about the moment you realized you deserved better than being the backup plan. Because somewhere out there, someone who thinks they're crazy for finally walking away might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for watching. If this story helped you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And remember, you are not selfish for choosing yourself. You're just finally putting yourself first. You deserve better. And you are not alone.